the Gospel of Mark, but continue on in chapter 2 and verse 13, that Jesus went out again by the sea, and all the multitude came to him, and he taught them. So because of his miracles, because he's performing miracles, people are interested in hearing what he has to say. And that's really the main point of the miracles. They prove his identity. They prove he's the Son of God. They prove that the word that he was speaking was from God, and people wanted to hear that. You know, if a man's performing miracles by the power of God, you sure want to listen to whatever he has to say. And that's something we need to understand in our study of the Gospel of Mark. If you're just becoming acquainted with Jesus, we're not asking you, Jesus is not asking you to believe him just because he says, I've got a word from God, but he's asking you to look at the evidence that he truly came from God, the miracles that he performed, and ultimately even his resurrection from the dead. These are things that demonstrate that he truly is God in the flesh and that his words are from God. Well, the text goes on and says that as he passed by, he saw Levi, the son of Alphaeus, sitting at the tax office, and he said to him, "Follow me." So he arose and followed him. Levi, apparently also known as Matthew, was a tax collector. Tax collectors were infamous in the time of Christ because they were considered traitors to their own nation. The Romans had overrun Judea, and Israel was now subjugated to the Roman Empire. They were having to pay taxes to Rome. You can imagine how grating that would be to do that. Imagine that our country, the United States, is overrun by a foreign power, maybe China or Russia or Iran or something. And imagine one who is a United States citizen then sort of becoming a turncoat and collecting taxes for the occupying nation, for Russia or China or whatever. Well, that person would be considered a traitor among us and be really looked down upon by most of his fellow citizens. That was true of tax collectors in the time of Christ. Besides that, some of the tax collectors were cheats, and they collected a lot more tax than they needed to just to fill their own bank accounts. And so there was that dual problem of being a traitor and then really a thief as well. And so they were really despised by their countrymen. Jesus knows all of that. He knows everything there is to know probably about Levi or Matthew, as we find his name later to be. But he tells him, "Follow me," and Levi gets up and does that, just arises and follows him. Now again, don't suppose that Levi had never had any experience with Christ before. Christ had been in Capernaum multiple times already, healed many people there already, taught there already. So here's a man, he could not have escaped knowing about Jesus already with as many times as Christ is there. But he was, no doubt, by his interactions with Christ, duly impressed with who Jesus was. And he realizes, here is somebody that I need to follow, and it just leaves all. He leaves everything, gets up from his little tax office and follows him. And then the text goes on and tells us that it happened that he was dining in Levi's house. Jesus went to Levi's house, and many of the tax collectors and sinners also sat together with Jesus and his disciples. There were many, and they followed him. So a lot of people who were considered, spiritually outcasts were willing to follow Jesus. Jesus wasn't always appealing to those who were part of the religious elite. In fact, most of the time he did not appeal to them, or even to those who are just common people who are highly religious, although many of those came to him as well, especially. But here are tax collectors and sinners, regarded by their own people as the most vile among them. And many of them, though, see their need for Jesus, they understand who he is, and they follow him. Here's the one who can speak forgiveness of their sins, and they are interested in that. So the scribes and the Pharisees, though, they saw this. They saw him eating with the tax collectors and sinners in verse 16. And they said to his disciples, "How is it that he eats and drinks with tax collectors and sinners?" And Jesus, when he heard it, he said to them, "Those who are well have no need of a physician, but those who are sick. I did not come to call the righteous, but sinners to repentance." People who are well, don't need to go to the doctor. People who feel sick do. And certainly in this time of the pandemic crisis that we're currently experiencing here in our country, we understand that. If you're sick, you know, if you call the doctor and he says, yeah, come in, you need a test, or go by a test clinic and you need to be tested, we understand that. And if you need treatment, you need to go to the hospital or whatever the medical people tell you to do. But those are the people who need the treatment. The thing is, there are a lot of people in the world today, as there were in the time of Christ, who felt like they didn't need a physician. The sad truth, of course, was that all of mankind is and was sin sick. And we all need Jesus. We all need Jesus. But the scribes and Pharisees didn't think they did. They didn't think they had sins that needed forgiving. They thought they were pretty well off, all right with God. Many consider themselves perfect in the sight of God. These people didn't feel like they needed a physician, but here were other people who were sinners, for sure, but they recognized their need for spiritual healing. And so they're the ones who are following Christ, and he truly is the great physician.